Gettysburg the Wheatfield by Victory Point Games. First game in the Tattered Flags series. This is a series of miniature games about the American Civil War, and it is a miniature game without miniatures, meaning that units are represented by cardboard counters and move on a board. You measure distances rather than moving from point to point or from hex to hex. The space is continuous, but you do not have to spend a lot of money buying miniatures, spend a lot of time painting miniatures, then figure out a way to store the miniatures. Miniature gaming, of course, requires a huge investment in time and money, and it is sometimes nice to get all the subtleties and complexities and nuances of miniature gaming without having to go through all the trouble of getting involved with actual miniatures. Anyways, Gettysburg the Wheatfield. This is mainly an introduction to the Tattered Flags system. The map is small, there aren't many scenarios to play. The rulebook even tells you that here you do not have all of the things that the system can offer, all the things that you can do, because this really is mainly a product that will get you acquainted with the system, so that you can become familiar with it, and then newer installments, and I hope larger installments will come out. You will be able to combine installments, and then you will have some massive and epic gaming. But for now, we have the introduction. So let's see how Gettysburg the Wheatfield works and what kind of introduction to the system it is. The map is printed on thick paper, so from that point of view it is standard Victory Point Games material, but aesthetically this is just the most beautiful Victory Point Games map that I've ever seen. It just looks so nice. A main feature on this map is represented by these areas here of rocky woods. They influence movement. Units that are moving across those areas will suffer heavy levels of disorder, but also those areas offer great protection against fire combat, so there are pluses and minuses. Another important feature is represented by these lines here that indicate steep changes in elevation, and those lines also influence movement. The game comes with three scenarios, an introductory scenario, a main historical scenario, and a what-if scenario. In the first two scenarios, the Union will be defending the central area of the map with some units along this wall, and in the main historical scenario with some units along this edge here, with artillery coming from this direction, and in the main historical scenario with reinforcements joining the fight later, whereas the Confederates will be entering the map from this area here and will be attacking the Union. There also is a what-if scenario, but that one I haven't tried yet. Units are divided by brigade, and the brigade is indicated on the right side of the counter. Each brigade has a brigade leader represented by a stand placed on the map, and units are activated by brigade. So first you activate the leader, and then you activate all of the units belonging to that leader. Each leader has a counter indicating the order that that leader is following. When you activate the leader, you also slide that counter to indicate that that leader acted, and there are four possible orders that the leader is trying to follow. When you activate a leader, you can also try to change the order of that leader. You roll on a table. Your chances of success depend on the quality of the leader, but if you're successful, then the leader receives a new order that you project on all the units belonging to that leader and within command radius of that leader. Units have different levels of quality indicated by that symbol at the bottom left corner of the unit, and that indicates the number of actions that a unit can perform. Also, units are represented by these counters here that are called stands, and you may have single stand units or multiple stand units. Multiple stand units are represented by several stands, but they act as a single unit. All the stands forming such a unit have to be attached to one another at all times. You cannot separate them, you cannot detach them. And units can be in one or two formations. They can be in column, like in this case. A unit in column clearly travels faster, but is more exposed to danger in case of combat. Or a unit can be in a battle line, and you can switch between formations by spending actions. When you change a unit from column to battle line, you simply place the units behind the leading unit around at the two sides of the leading unit, like that. A unit in a straight battle line can still move, but it moves more slowly than a unit in column. Also, when moving, such a unit touches more terrain features, so receives more penalties from that. The game comes with a turn track with important reminders printed on it and a player aid. This player aid is going to be your best friend and your worst enemy in the game. There's a lot of information printed on this player aid. Unfortunately, there's only one player aid and it is double-sided. So unless you make a photocopy, you will be flipping this one a lot. The units that you activate when your brigade leader activates can perform a number of actions, which is indicated on this reminder here, and it depends on the rank of the unit. Then how you spend those actions for each unit depends on the order that the unit is following. And the units will always be following one of these 4 orders, and these orders really affect a lot of things. For example, the maximum number of movement actions that a unit can perform. You may have more than one action available, but if a unit is under a defend order, only one of those actions can be used to perform movement. And other things that will be affected by the order are whether or not a charge move is allowed, if there is a modifier on the die roll for recovery, if there are special notes about change formation, the number of fire attack dice that you roll may be modified, the number of return fire attacks that you can perform also will be modified. Usually you can perform 1 per turn. But a unit under a defend order can return fire anytime the unit wants. And there may also be a modifier on the die roll for your morale test. So as you can see, there is really a lot that must be taken into account, and it may take you a couple of turns before you figure out which are the best sequences of actions that you can get out of the number of actions allowed and the modifiers and the specificities of each action. Units can spend actions to move. If they're moving straight ahead, they can move up to their maximum movement allowance as indicated by this ruler. Infantry in battle line, for example, can move up to 2 inches. As your units move, they will encounter obstacles that will increase the level of disorder of the unit. Depending on the type of obstacle that the unit is touching, you will add disorder markers up to a maximum of level 4 of disorder. If a unit has disorder at level 4 and must take another level of disorder that cannot be taken in that form, then you take those levels of disorders as reductions to your stands. If all of the stands in a unit have already been reduced and you still need to take that reduction, then you simply start losing stands, and this is how you lose your units. Well, not only during movement, but combat will have a similar effect. Combat will also increase the level of disorder of your units, and in some cases will reduce the number of stands of the unit. A unit doesn't have to only move straight ahead. A unit can also choose to simply change orientation by turning around its geometric center. A unit can change formation from column to line and from line to column. You can change the type of line, again, by spending an action. You can also order a unit to go to ground. You place this marker on that unit, and now that unit is particularly good at defending. Units can attack in different ways. You can execute fire combat when you activate your unit. You can execute return fire if your unit was the target of an attack, or you can use opportunity fire if you're the non-active player and units of the active player ended movement too close to your own units. These attacks work in slightly different ways, so let's just talk about the main type of attack. A unit can execute 1 fire attack per activation, but that attack can target up to 2 enemy units, and you can spend multiple actions to make that attack more powerful. It is still only 1 attack, but it may cost several actions if you want to power it up. To be able to fight an opponent, you have to check several things. You have to make sure that the opponent is within range, is within the arc of fire of the firing units, and you have to make sure that there are no intervening obstacles from terrain or from units that may block the line of sight. If you're able to fire the opponent, then you determine the number of dice that you will roll against the opponent. That number will depend on the number of stands that are firing and the condition of the stand, whether the stand is full or reduced. Also, if you spend several actions, then you get an additional fire attack die for each extra action that you spent in that attack. Opportunity fire reduces the number of dice that you have. The number of dice will be modified by the order that the unit is receiving, the disorder level of the unit, the target unit conditions, the terrain where the target is, if a unit has gone to ground. Then we roll the dice that you acquired from this procedure, and you check this at the table to see the number to hit that you're trying to match, and that will depend on the type of unit that is firing and on the distance between the firing unit and the target. Usually is 5 or 6 at point blank, and then 6 at battle range or extreme range. Once you determine the number of hits and you apply them, the target unit may have to take a morale test. If the unit suffered a hit at battle range or 2 hits at extreme range, then the unit must take a morale test. The owning player rolls 2 dice, totals the result, and applies modifiers from this section of the player aid. Yes, there is quite a bunch of modifiers that you have to become familiar with. Those modifiers may be based on the terrain where the target unit is, other factors such as fire through a flank or through the rear, the rank of the target unit, the order of the target unit, the level of disorder of the target unit, morale modifiers that may be on that unit because of previously failed morale tests. Well, once you take into account all of these modifiers, you look at this table and that tells you what happened. The unit may fail the morale test and receive some of these markers that indicate negative effects. The unit may pass, or the unit may pass so well that it will receive a confident marker that will make it easier for that unit to pass future morale tests. And there are the rules, other things that you can do. There are rules to execute charges, and charges are brutal and gruesome as they should be. There are rules to recover units that you lost or to reduce your level of disorder. They're just different things that you can do, and I'm not going to cover those in detail, both because I don't want the review to be too long, but mainly because I don't want you to think that the game is more complicated than it is. I'm just afraid that if I repeat a rule after the other, the game is going to sound much more complicated than it is. There are, yes, many rules, but they do work together well, and once you grasp the general idea, you see that actually the game really relies on a pretty simple and definitely a solid core of rules, and then you have a lot of different nuances and varieties and modifiers that add chrome and historicity and challenges. So the game really, once you get to know it, moves well. Doesn't mean that it moves fast. It is still a game that takes time to play. It has a slow build-up, but luckily enough, I think it is a build-up that is full of tension, as the units are struggling to find the right position, and more importantly, it is a slow build-up that still is not, it doesn't feel mechanical. It doesn't feel we have to go through that, because that still has challenges which are based, of course, on how you organize your orders, and even more so, how you keep the cohesion of your units, how you're going to spend extra actions to keep your units in tight order, but that of course takes time, where you're gonna risk to go against the enemy, spend your action to go against the enemy sooner, but of course with an army, with units that are less tightly organized and they're more exposed to danger. There are interesting things even in that slow build-up, because definitely this is a game that is about maneuvering, and it is about orders and about cohesion. I really enjoy this. This really gives the game a strong historical feel. The game feels, in fact, more of a simulation than a game, strictly speaking. The only negative things that I could say about this game are about the fact that this game does feel like an introduction to something bigger. The map is really a little constrictive. It may feel claustrophobic after a while. There aren't many scenarios. There isn't a huge variety. After playing the game, precisely because I enjoyed the system, I would have liked to be able to try more things with the system. But I guess that this was the initial idea to start with. The idea was that this game would get you started with the system, but then would also leave you wanting for more. And definitely in this, the game achieved its goal, at least with me. I definitely enjoyed this game. I enjoyed learning and playing the system, and I really want to see what happens next. And I'm really curious to try the system on larger maps with more scenarios and more units.